So today I'm going to be talking about rhetoric and leading up to the rhetorical situation. So understand that rhetoric is the art, it's the study of the art of persuasion and argumentation. In other words, when we study rhetoric, we take a look at the choices that the author makes and analyze why the author is making those specific choices, what's their purpose, and how does it influence and manipulate their audience. Okay, this is extremely important because rhetoric is pretty much everywhere. Anywhere you look in speeches, commercials, movies, there's some rhetoric. And as you go throughout high school, you're going to be studying the various levels of rhetoric. So the first level is the rhetorical situation, which is what we're going to focus on today. That's the speaking and audience relationship, the context and medium and genre in which it's produced, everything that the author has to take into consideration when writing their text. The next level is the rhetorical appeals, and you'll be studying this next year in 10th grade. So the rhetorical appeals are ethos, pathos, logos. For a lot of you, that may sound very familiar. So ethos is ethics or credibility. Pathos is the passion or the emotion, and logos is logic. So authors don't use these, but rather appeal to them in order to make that connection with their audience to achieve their specific purpose, which is ultimately a form of manipulation. And let's face it, all writing is a form of manipulation. The last level is what you will study in 11th grade, which is the rhetorical and stylistic choices that the author makes in order to appeal to the audience. It's things like using facts and statistics to appeal to their sense of logic. And so today, like I said, we're going to focus on the rhetorical situation. And next term, we're going to continue with that focus so that when you go off into 10th grade, you have that basis to understand the rhetorical appeals and then eventually 11th grade, rhetorical and stylistic choices. So let's talk about the rhetorical situation. So this is what's known as the rhetorical triangle, which was created by Aristotle. When it comes to the rhetorical triangle, the 3 points represent the three main aspects and relationships that the author has to take into consideration prior to actually writing their text. So we have the speaker, the subject, and the audience. So first off, the author has to consider what is their relationship with the subject. When an author is trying to be persuasive and bring forth their information, they have to be aware of their own level of biases. If the author tries to hide their level of bias rather than confront it and show that they can go ahead and look at something objectively, then this can be a red flag for us. The other relationship is the subject-audience relationship. So the speaker or the author wants to be aware of how the audience relates to the subject and how the subject relates to the audience, because that's going to affect what information they include. If their subject is something that the audience, their intended audience, is very well versed in, then they're not going to want to bore them with the minutia and the background information. They're going to jump straight into it. But if the audience is not familiar with the subject, then they might take some time doing more setup. This is really key and important for us to understand, because the reality is that we are not always the intended audience. Okay? So when we're taking a look at a text and we notice that the author maybe doesn't go into a ton of background information, before we critique that, we have to ask ourselves, well, does their intended audience already have that information? And if that's the case, then that's a choice that the author's making to get to their main point faster, because they don't need to go into that background information. And then the last relationship is the speaker and audience relationship, okay? And this really takes into consideration a power dynamic. Is there a power dynamic at play, or are they on the same level? How does the speaker relate to the audience? All of this is encompassed within the context and occasion of the piece. So where and when is it published? What happened to inspire this piece being written? So like the piece that you just read, our current situation with COVID is what she talks about, and what inspires her to write the article about this issue, about the American dream. And then, of course, where is it published, what date, et cetera, et cetera. All that is part of the context and occasion. The last little bit of the rhetorical situation is the genre and purpose. Depending on what the author's purpose is, that's going to influence the genre, or vice versa. If the author wants to merely inform their reader, then an article suffices. If they're wanting to argue, then maybe an op-ed, an opinion editorial, or a speech. If they're wanting to entertain, then maybe a song or a story. So depending on what the purpose is of the piece, it's going to influence the genre. Or if the author feels like writing a speech or writing an article, then that might shift their purpose, and therefore it's going to affect what information they include, the word choice that they use, etc., etc. So all of this demonstrates the rhetorical situation of a text. When it comes to remembering the rhetorical situation of a text, we use an acronym known as SOAPS. And so if you have a piece of paper or something to take notes with right now, you can go ahead and take notes on this. Just write down at least the first question or two under each thing. If you don't have anything readily available right now, then just go back later and take a look at the lesson slides and take notes. So SOAPS just stands for all the various parts of the rhetorical situation. So you have speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, and subject. So once again, when we take a look at the speaker, we're taking a look at who is the person, who's the author that's writing the piece, what's their background, and is there any potential bias? O is for the occasion and context. So what's the occasion? What's the time and place that this is written? What's inspired the author to write this piece? A is for audience. So who's the audience? Is the audience one person, a small group? Is it just like the general public, or is it a specific group or even a specific individual? So who's the audience? Because that's going to affect a lot of what the author does. P is for purpose. So what's the purpose? Is it to inform, to explain, to suggest, to argue, to persuade? Understand, arguing and persuading are two different things. To argue is to just prove your point. To persuade is to convince the reader that you are right. Okay? So it's like an extra step. So we take a look at the purpose. What is it? And then the last S, the second S, is subject. So what is the subject of the document? In other words, what is the main idea? So when you're working on SOAPS for the article you just read, under subject, you're just going to take your main idea statement that you just wrote out and write it there. Okay? So the next step is to go to Google Classroom, and you're going to find a new assignment posted called SOAPS Worksheet. This is ungraded because ideally we were all supposed to do this together, but because more than half the class is missing, we're just going to do it individually, and then we'll talk about it on Wednesday when hopefully we'll all be here. And so on this SOAPS worksheet, okay, you're going to go ahead and identify the rhetorical situation of this piece of the article that you just read about the American dream. So you'll put the title here, then you'll put the subject, answer these questions, occasion, answer these questions, audience, answer these questions, purpose, answer these questions. If you click on purpose, it'll take you to a link with all the various different purposes that you can choose from, the most common ones. And then, I switched subject and speaker, that's okay. And then the last S, who's speaker, answer these questions, okay? And that's pretty much it for the rhetorical situation.